20 gadgets from the 1970s that were ahead of their time. Remember the 70s? A decade bursting with disco lights, cassette tapes, and bold dreams. But beyond the bell-bottoms and dance floors, it was also a golden age of futuristic tech. Gadgets once thought impossible suddenly became real. In today's video, we're going to explore together 20 of the most iconic gadgets from the 70s that were truly ahead of their time. You might have forgotten some of the items on this list existed, but I believe there will be names and images that make you suddenly exclaim, "Oh, that's right, memories flooding back." Atari Pong. Let's start with an icon of home entertainment. Do you remember this simple game? That small white dot moving on a black screen and two paddles going up and down. It was released in 1972 by Alan Alcorn. Initially, it was just a learning tool created by Alan Alcorn to train his video game design skills for Atari. It simulated the familiar game of table tennis, but in electronic form. On the outside, it was incredibly simple, with extremely basic graphics, just a small square representing the ball and two lines representing the paddles. But hidden beneath that simplicity was an irresistible appeal that made players extremely addicted. The Pong arcade machine quickly became popular in bars and entertainment centers everywhere. But Pong's influence was much greater. It wasn't just a temporary entertainment game. Atari Pong took video games to a whole new level. It was the first commercially successful video game in history. Pong's resounding success kicked off what was called the arcade game boom, opening a new era for the budding game industry. It was even one of the first times electronic games combined with sports, a concept we now call esports. Notably, in 1975, Atari launched a home version called Atari Home Pong. This product revolutionized home entertainment, strongly proving that electronic games could absolutely exist and thrive in the living room space of every family. From that simple white dot and two paddles, an entire billion-dollar entertainment industry was born. Personal computers, Microcomputer / Apple II / Commodore PET / TRS-80. Today, everyone has a computer, maybe even several, from laptops, desktops, to tablets. But a few decades ago, the idea of owning an entire computer just for yourself sounded really distant. That was the world of large, bulky computers, only for giant corporations or research institutes, until these machines appeared. That was the birth of the microcomputer, also known as the personal computer. Everything started with pioneering models like the Altair 8800, born in 1975 by MITS. Before that, computers were giant-sized, mainframe, or large, mini-computer, and extremely expensive. The appearance of microprocessors significantly helped shrink computer size and reduce costs. The Altair 8800 was initially mainly sold as a kit and targeted electronics hobbyists. But then, more popular and user-friendly models were born in 1977, a year considered a major milestone. Those were the Apple II, designed by Steve Wozniak, Commodore PET, designed by Chuck Peddle, and TRS-80 from Tandy Radio Shack. These machines were easier to use. Some models like the Commodore PET had built-in screens and keyboards. The Apple II and TRS-80 had flexible expandability. The Apple II is especially highlighted as a game-changer for personal computers, thanks to its user-friendly design for the general public. The Commodore PET, on the other hand, pioneered the all-in-one design. The impact of this class of 1977 trio is hard to overstate. They ushered in the personal computer era, truly putting computing power into the hands of everyday users. This not only changed how people worked, but also stimulated the strong development of the software industry, with examples like the BASIC operating system from Microsoft, which was very small back then, or the VisiCalc spreadsheet program. The explosion of new technology companies like Apple Computer is proof of this change. Wikipedia even calls Apple, Commodore, and Tandy the 1977 Trinity, who shaped the early personal computer market. Email. Instant communication is a given these days. We have all kinds of messaging apps. But do you still remember the "you've got mail" sound from AOL? Or even further back, the idea that you could send a message via computer from one place to another, between different computers. This revolutionary idea is email, and it was born very early in 1971. Its inventor was Ray Tomlinson, while working on the ARPANET, the precursor to today's internet. Before Tomlinson's invention, messages could only be sent and received between users logged into the same single large computer mainframe. It was like leaving a sticky note on a colleague's desk, but in the digital space. Ray Tomlinson pondered how a user on computer A could send a message to a user on computer B, two completely different machines. And he found the solution. That solution was simple yet groundbreaking, using the AT symbol. This symbol was used to separate the user's name from the name of the computer that user was using. For example, username at computer name. This created a unique address for each user on the network, allowing messages to be routed accurately to the destination computer and recipient. This invention laid the foundation for a revolutionary form of communication. From humble beginnings on the ARPANET, email gradually developed and became a global phenomenon. It was the first major step in connecting people via computer in a personal, fast, and efficient way. Although the way we use email has changed a lot, its basic principle and importance remain intact. Cell phone. Remember those legendary brick phones? Durable, long battery life, just for calls. But actually, the concept of a mobile handheld phone appeared very early, with an even brickier version, born right in the 70s. We're talking about the first handheld mobile phone. The first call from such a device was made in 1973 by Martin Cooper of Motorola. Before Cooper and his team, many other large telecom companies tried to develop mobile wireless communication devices for individuals, but struggled or failed. The first prototype Martin Cooper used to make that historic call was extremely bulky, weighing over 1 kilogram, equivalent to about 2.5 pounds. Imagine carrying a brick that heavy to your ear to talk. It wasn't until 1983 that the first commercial mobile phone was launched, the Motorola Dynatac. It was still very heavy, 2.5 pounds, and its price was dizzying. The Dynatac cost about $4,000 in 1983, equivalent to over $23,000 in today's money. It was truly a luxury item. Although crude and expensive in the early stages, this invention had immense significance. It turned the concept of a mobile phone from science fiction into reality. It showed the world that personal wireless communication was completely feasible. This pioneering step paved the way for the great mobile revolution that happened later, leading to the birth of smartphones and the wireless connected world we live in. Which item brings back the most memories for you? Share your story in the comments below. VCR, video cassette recorder. Watching movies at home anytime you want? Recording your favorite TV show to watch later? Sounds normal with today's streaming services, but there was a time when this was a miracle. And it all started with this machine. That was the home video cassette recorder, or VCR. Philips was a pioneer, launching the first home VCR in 1972. This device allowed users to record broadcast content from TV, with recording capability up to 240 minutes, 4 hours. It changed the definition of home entertainment. For the first time, viewers were no longer tied to the broadcasting schedules of TV channels. You could record your favorite movie in the evening to watch on the weekend, or skip annoying commercials. The advent of the VCR also sparked one of the most famous video format wars in tech history, the battle between VHS, from JVC, and Betamax, from Sony. Betamax came out first and had slightly better picture quality. However, VHS ultimately won the market. The reasons were that VHS didn't require high licensing fees, manufacturing costs for tapes and machines were cheaper, and most importantly, recording time on a single tape was longer than Betamax. The VCR revolutionized home entertainment, creating a huge video rental and sales industry, with rental stores becoming familiar places. It truly put content time-shifting power into the hands of users, a very advanced idea at the time. Digital camera. We live in a world of smartphones with super sharp cameras. The idea of taking pictures without using film rolls is obvious, but before iPhones or compact digital cameras, the idea of taking pictures without film was a real revolution. The first digital camera didn't look like what you see today. The prototype of the first digital camera was invented in 1975 by Steve Sasson at Kodak. Kodak was the giant in the film industry at the time. Sasson's prototype looked bulky like a toaster. It could only capture black and white photos and had extremely low resolution, only 0.01 megapixel, while cheap smartphones today can reach tens or hundreds of megapixels. Images were stored on cassette tape. And the astonishing thing was that it took 23 seconds to capture and save just one picture. Despite creating this invention, Kodak was not enthusiastic about pursuing it, fearing that this new technology would negatively impact their profitable traditional film business. Also in 1975, the first commercial digital camera appeared, the Chromemco Cyclops. It used MOS memory chips as image sensors and had a resolution of 32 by 32 pixels, even lower than Kodak's prototype. The Chromemco Cyclops was a peripheral device, requiring connection to a microcomputer to function. Although still very rudimentary and limited, these inventions had historical significance. They paved the way for the era of digital photography, a technology that would later completely change how we capture, store, and share photos. The idea of storing images in digital form was a leap forward, breaking the physical limitations of traditional film photography. Although Kodak missed the opportunity, the legacy of the 1975 invention is still there. Global Positioning System, GPS. Today, we open our phones and know exactly where we are. Map apps guide us everywhere. Going somewhere without a paper map or constantly asking for directions, back then, that was a miracle, something only seen in spy movies. And this technology started right in the 70s. We're talking about the Global Positioning System, or GPS. GPS was not the invention of a single person or company. It was developed by the U.S. Navy initially as a military project. The GPS system officially launched in 1978 with the launch of the first satellite named Navstar. The development of GPS took place in the context of the space and technology race between the United States and the Soviet Union. It took nearly a decade of testing and building the initial satellite infrastructure before the system became operational. In the early stages, GPS was exclusive U.S. military technology, primarily serving military purposes such as positioning warships, aircraft, and missiles. The ability to accurately determine location on Earth through signals from satellites was a giant leap forward. Although initially for military purposes only, later, GPS signals were allowed for civilian use. This opened up the possibility of accurate global positioning for everyone. This allowance led to the explosion of countless modern positioning applications. We use daily, from finding directions for walking or driving to tracking location, managing vehicle fleets. Portable music player, Sony Walkman. Music is a companion. Today, we carry a giant music library in our smartphones. But before iPods or smartphones, the idea of personal music carried anywhere easily and privately seemed like a dream, until this legendary name appeared. That was the Sony Walkman. The first portable music player model, the TPSL2, was launched by Sony in 1979. Before the Walkman, Listening to music usually happened at home on a large stereo system or shared with others via a boombox, which we'll talk about later. There was no way for a person to enjoy their own music privately while on the go. The Walkman changed that. It allowed users to listen to music from cassette tapes anywhere using personal headphones. The initial design of the Walkman was lightweight, small enough to hold in your hand or wear on your body. It quickly became a cultural icon, symbolizing personal freedom and self-expression. You could walk down the street, ride the bus, or sit in the park, immersed in your own world of music. The Walkman became so popular that the name Walkman was sometimes used generically for any portable music player. It laid a solid foundation for the development of all subsequent portable music devices, from CD players, MP3 players, to smartphones. It is one of the most influential consumer inventions of the 70s. Digital watch. For hundreds of years, people told time with hands moving on a dial. Then suddenly, in the 70s, something new appeared, telling time just with glowing numbers on an electronic screen. At first glance, it looked really futuristic, like something out of a science fiction movie. That was the birth and popularization of the digital watch. The first commercial digital watches began appearing in the early 1970s. Hamilton was a pioneer with the Pulsar P1 launched in 1972. Instead of using traditional mechanical movements and hands, digital watches displayed time using numbers on an electronic screen. Initially LED, light-emitting diode, later LCD, liquid crystal display. The initial Pulsar P1 was very expensive, costing up to $2,100, a huge amount of money at the time. With LED watches, you often had to press a button to see the time because continuous display consumed battery. LCD screen technology later emerged and overcame this drawback, allowing continuous time display and much better battery life. Japanese companies like Casio, Seiko, and Citizen quickly adopted this technology. They mass-produced digital watches with many different designs, and most importantly, reduced costs, making digital watches widely accessible to the public. Citizen even pioneered integrating miniature calculators into wristwatches. They provided higher accuracy than mechanical watches, were more convenient for checking time in the dark with a lit screen, and allowed adding many other features like alarms, stopwatches. Do you remember the first time you saw a Pong or a personal computer? Share with us. Portable calculator. Back then, doing complex math wasn't easy. You had to use bulky slide rules or large, slow mechanical calculators. But then, a small machine appeared. It fit neatly in your pocket, and just by pressing a few buttons, it gave you the result. This small machine changed how we learned, worked, and calculated. That was the electronic portable calculator. It began appearing and became popular in the early 1970s. Pioneering companies mainly came from the US, like Sharp, Texas Instruments TI, and HP Hewlett-Packard. Clive Sinclair in the UK also made significant contributions. The birth of the portable calculator was thanks to the development of integrated circuits, IC, and large-scale integration, LSI, chips. These chips allowed the entire logic and calculation circuitry to be shrunk to a very small size. The Mostek MK6010, born in 1970, is considered the first calculator on a chip. The Bizicom LE120A, Handy, 1971, used this chip and is considered the first true pocket calculator in the world. Initially, portable calculators were very expensive, only accessible to engineers and scientists. For example, the HP-35, the first portable scientific calculator, launched in 1972, cost up to $395. However, due to fierce competition and increasingly advanced manufacturing technology, the price of portable calculators dropped sharply very quickly. This led to a heated race between US and Japanese manufacturers. It was truly a gadget with immense impact on daily life. Laser printer. In offices of the past, typewriters were the main tool for creating documents. Making multiple high-quality copies was not simple. Then a new printing technology appeared, faster, quieter, and produced much better prints. That was the laser printer. Laser printing technology was developed in the 1970s. The first high-speed laser printer was the IBM 3800, launched in 1976. Unlike impact printers, which created prints by hitting small pins onto an ink ribbon, laser printers used a laser beam and dry ink, toner, to create images or text on paper. The laser draws the image onto a charged photosensitive drum, then toner adheres to the illuminated areas, and finally, the toner is transferred to paper and fused by heat to stick firmly. The advantages of laser printers over impact printers were very clear. They operated much more quietly, produced sharper prints, especially for text. Laser printers also had the ability to handle various fonts and even more complex graphics. The early IBM 3800 was a giant machine, very fast, could print up to 215 pages per minute, and extremely expensive, priced around $500,000 USD. It was designed for large businesses with high-volume printing needs. However, over time, this technology gradually shrank, became cheaper, and more popular. Cassette tape. Storage for computers. Using ordinary audio cassette tapes to store data for personal computers was a practical and common solution in the late 70s and early 80s. The reason was simple. Floppy disk drives, the more modern storage medium, were very expensive at the time. Often, the price of a floppy disk drive was more expensive than the computer itself. Audio cassette tapes were different. They leveraged cassette recorders that were already available in many households, and cassette tapes themselves were much cheaper than floppy disks. However, storing data on cassette tapes also had major drawbacks. Data read-write speed was extremely slow, only about 300 to 1200 baud. Loading a small program or game from a cassette tape could take many minutes, and loading errors were frequent, requiring you to try again and again. Furthermore, cassette tapes were a sequential access medium, meaning you had to manually fast-forward or rewind the tape to the correct position to find the desired file. You couldn't access randomly like a disk drive. Even the early IBM PC launched in 1981 still came with a cassette interface, simply because IBM was still concerned about the price of disk drives being a barrier for general users. Despite the inconvenience, this medium provided a cheap way to store data, making personal computers accessible to more users. It was an important stepping stone before floppy disk drives became more common and affordable. For many people, the rattling sounds when the computer loaded data from a cassette tape are an unforgettable part of childhood memories associated with early home computers. Boombox. Music isn't just for listening alone. Sometimes you want to share it with everyone around you, anywhere. You need something big enough, powerful enough to do that. And so the boombox was born. Boomboxes, also known as portable stereos, became extremely popular in the 1970s and 1980s. These were portable stereo machines, often quite large. They integrated a radio tuner, cassette player, and recorder, along with powerful speakers on the sides. Boomboxes allowed people to take their music into public spaces, parks, beaches, street corners. The boombox quickly became a cultural icon of the 70s to 80s. It is closely associated with the development of street music culture, especially breakdancing and street parties. Boomboxes played an important role in popularizing hip-hop music in its early stages. When DJs and b-boys practiced and performed outdoors, the boombox was their main sound source. It was a form of community, shared entertainment, in contrast to the privacy of the Walkman, although both were portable devices. A large boombox on the shoulder, blasting lively music, is an iconic image of the free-spirited, liberal vibe of that era. Dedicated word processor. Typing documents on a traditional typewriter was a job requiring carefulness. If you made a mistake, correcting it wasn't easy. You had to use correction paper, whiteout, or retype the whole page. Document creation became much easier when this machine appeared. That was the word processor. Not software on a computer, but a dedicated device. The first dedicated word processor machines were born in the 1970s. Essentially, they were computers designed to serve only one single purpose: creating and editing text. They usually had an integrated screen and keyboard, along with a processor and memory to store text temporarily or permanently, often using floppy disks or magnetic tape. The biggest and most revolutionary difference compared to typewriters was the ability to easily edit text electronically. You could type incorrectly, then use the backspace or delete key to erase. You could insert words, sentences, cut and paste paragraphs, format margins, align, without having to retype everything. This significantly improved efficiency and productivity in document creation, especially in office environments. Although these machines were expensive and bulky compared to later PCs, they paved the way for the development of modern word processing software like Microsoft Word, Google Docs, on personal computers. Now, I want to hear from you. Are there any other tech gadgets from the 70s that left a deep impression on you that I missed? List them in the comments below so I and everyone else can see. Polaroid SX70 Instant Camera. A great moment just happened. You take a picture, and then you wait. Take the film roll to be developed. Wait a few days, then you can see the pictures. That took so much time. But in the 70s, there was a miracle that allowed you to shoot and see immediately. This camera was launched by Polaroid in 1972. Its most special ability, and also its main attraction, was that it could print photos right after taking them. You just pressed the shutter button. The picture would slide out of the camera, and within a few minutes, the image would slowly appear on special Polaroid photo paper. This was a wonderful combination of convenience and technological innovation at the time. The Polaroid SX70 wasn't just technologically advanced. It also had a unique foldable design, very portable, and looked extremely stylish. The camera became extremely popular and sold millions of units worldwide. Polaroid's instant film was also a distinctive technology of the company. The magic of watching the image gradually appear on the white film created a unique experience. Polaroid also experimented with other instant technologies like Polaroid Polar Vision, 1977, which allowed instant video recording, though it wasn't commercially successful. The Polaroid SX70 brought instant gratification to photography. It was a symbol of innovation in the photography industry and created countless physical, tangible memories immediately. Cuisinart food processor. Cooking is an art, but sometimes it's also time-consuming. Chopping vegetables, mincing meat, mixing dough. Each step requires separate tools and effort. But in the 70s, a kitchen gadget was born, promising to make food preparation much faster, much easier. That was the Cuisinart food processor. This device was developed by Carl Sontheimer and launched in the US in the 1970s. The Cuisinart food processor is essentially a multi-purpose device. It was designed to combine many different food preparation functions into a single machine with interchangeable blades and cutting discs. You could use it to evenly slice vegetables, finely chop onions and garlic, mince meat, grind nuts, knead dough. The initial price of a Cuisinart was around $200 US. Although not cheap, it quickly became popular in both professional restaurants and home kitchens. It represents one of the first applications of automation in cooking, helping people spend less time preparing and more time enjoying meals with family. Texas Instruments, Speak and Spell. How do kids learn to spell? Reading books, doing spelling tests? But what if there was a toy that could say the word out loud and check if you spelled it correctly? In the 70s, such a magical learn and play machine was born. This machine was launched in 1978. The special and pioneering point of the Speak and Spell was that it was the first educational device in the world to use speech synthesis technology. Instead of just displaying letters on the screen, this machine could speak. The machine would say a word, and the player's task was to use the built-in keyboard to spell the word back. The machine had a small screen to display the typed word and would give voice feedback on whether you spelled it correctly or incorrectly. Speech synthesis technology at that time was still very new and complex. Integrating it into an affordable consumer device, priced around $50 was a significant achievement. The Speak and Spell changed how children learned to spell and pronounce, turning learning into an engaging, interactive game. This machine sold very well and became a familiar item associated with the childhood of a generation of children. Bell System Picturephone. Communicating by phone was already a great step, but what if you could see the face of the person you're talking to? This idea of video calling, something we do every day via Zoom, Skype, or FaceTime, was actually conceived and even launched a very long time ago, even before the internet became popular. This product was launched by Bell System, AT&T's parent company at the time, in 1970. The Picturephone was a video telephone that allowed two users in different locations to see each other's image while having a voice conversation. It was considered a major step towards modern video conferencing. However, this technology in 1970 was still very expensive and limited. The Picturephone had extremely expensive usage fees, $160 per month in 1970, equivalent to about $1,100 in today's money. The hardware itself was also bulky and required a special network to operate. Due to the very high price and limited network, the Picturephone was a commercial failure. Only about 500 units were sold, mainly to large business customers or extremely wealthy individuals. Although commercially unsuccessful, the Picturephone was a pioneering product. It proved the feasibility of transmitting live video images over the telephone network. These initial efforts laid the foundation for video conferencing and video call technology that has become an indispensable communication tool in our lives and work today. This meant you were poor in the 1970s. In the 1970s, being poor wasn't always loud. It lived in the corners of the kitchen, in hand-me-down jeans and powdered milk. This video isn't about pity, it's about memory. Join us as we revisit 20 quiet, unmistakable signs that told the world you weren't rich, but you got by. Powdered milk. They didn't call it powdered milk at our house. It was simply the milk, as if naming it anything more would invite comparison. You'd shuffle into the kitchen, bleary-eyed from sleep, and reach for the plastic pitcher in the fridge, hoping it had been mixed well the night before. Sometimes it had. Sometimes the spoon still stood upright in a swirl of half-dissolved lumps. You poured it anyway. It was thin, it was warm, and it clung to your cereal like it wasn't sure it belonged. But it did belong, on every table where a gallon of the real thing cost more than a family could afford. It came from a box, kept quietly in the back of the cupboard, always ready to step in when the paycheck ran out. It didn't spoil. It didn't argue. It simply endured. No one loved it, though we all drank it. Children winced, fathers frowned, and mothers offered gentle reassurances. "It's milk," they said, though we all knew better. And yet, over time, it became a sort of badge. Proof that you could make do with less and still sit down together each morning. Powdered milk wasn't about taste. It was about getting through, one clumpy spoonful at a time. Ice milk. It may have looked like ice cream, but one bite told you otherwise. Ice milk was the stand-in, the imposter, the pale cousin of the real thing. It waited quietly in the freezer, right beside the cartons of butter and frozen peas, dressed in the same packaging but carrying far less joy. You'd take a spoonful, expecting something rich and velvety, and be met instead with a chill that dissolved too quickly, leaving behind only a faint sweetness and a little disappointment. Still, in those years when money didn't stretch far but expectations had to, ice milk earned its place. It was dessert after all, maybe not the one you dreamed of, but the one you were given. Mothers scooped it into old ceramic mugs or plastic tubs that once held margarine, making the most of what was on hand. Sometimes a bit of syrup tried to dress it up. Sometimes someone stirred it into a milkshake to hide its thinness. It wasn't indulgence, it was ingenuity. And you didn't complain, not out loud, because in homes where every penny mattered, even a meager dessert was an act of kindness. You ate it slowly, with quiet gratitude, and you told yourself it was enough, because more often than not, it had to be. Cereal. Have you ever reached past the bright, familiar boxes on the cereal aisle and knelt down to pick up breakfast wrapped in nothing but hope and thin plastic? Those store-brand bags, with names that sounded more like apologies than promises, were a quiet staple in homes where every dime counted. There were no cartoons on the label, no games on the back, no surprise toys inside. Just puffed corn or flattened flakes with a name like Toasted Crunch trying its best to belong. We didn't complain, at least not too loudly. You poured it into your bowl and listened to the soft rustle, like someone opening packing material. Then came the powdered milk, and the whole thing surrendered before your spoon even touched it. No mascots danced across the screen during Saturday morning cartoons to advertise it, but it was ours. It came in bulk, it came cheap, and it came often. Mothers could stretch a grocery budget by skipping the name brands, and children learned quickly that you ate what was served. Maybe you added a spoonful of sugar for good measure. Maybe not. But in those modest breakfasts, there was nourishment. Not only for the body, but in some small way, for the spirit of Saturday morning cartoons. They weren't simply cartoons. For children in the 1970s, Saturday mornings felt like a weekly holiday, celebrated with pajamas still rumpled and cereal poured into mismatched bowls. You'd rise early, tiptoe out before the rest of the house stirred, and stretch out across the living room carpet, eyes on the screen like it held the world. The television offered a rotating lineup of familiar heroes and oddballs. G.I. Joe marched in with bravado. The real Ghostbusters zapped through haunted cities. The Smurfs, tiny and blue, seemed to march straight from imagination. Networks didn't guess at what kids wanted. They delivered it with precision. But it didn't always go as planned. Sometimes the grown-up world barged in. A news flash, a weather emergency, or an unexpected special report. That blank screen left kids blinking, wondering why the fun had been paused by forces beyond their control. Still, week after week, the ritual returned. Spoons clinked in bowls. Animated theme songs blasted through the television set. You didn't analyze or critique. It was enough that they appeared. For a short while, everything worked in rhythm. And as the shows ended and sunlight crept in, you knew you'd seen something worth waking up for. Tray tables. Which dinner made of aluminum and preservatives could feel almost festive? In homes all over America during the 1970s, that honor went to the TV dinner, a divided tray heated in the oven, set down gently on a wobbly table facing the glow of primetime television. It wasn't gourmet, and nobody claimed it was nourishing, but it was different. And sometimes, different was enough. Perhaps your mother had called it an early night. Perhaps your father was working late. Or maybe this was planned in advance. One of those evenings when everything felt slightly looser than usual. You peeled back the foil with care, hoping for a brownie that hadn't fused with the potatoes. Salisbury steak swam in salty gravy. Mashed potatoes held the shape of the spoon. Vegetables were more suggestion than substance. Still, the tray brought comfort. A break from rules. A seat on the couch. A meal you didn't have to share or explain. You sat cross-legged, eyes fixed on the screen, and ate slowly. No linen, no passing dishes, no one judging how fast you finished dessert. If the brownie stayed on your plate from first bite to last chew, that was a quiet kind of triumph in itself. Enjoyed the trip down memory lane? Click like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. Bologna sandwiches. Among the many quiet symbols of growing up poor in the 1970s, few meals were more constant or more humbling than the humble Bologna sandwich. It wasn't a matter of choice. It was what you had. 2 slices of soft white bread cradled a single round of pale, processed meat. No lettuce, no tomato, and certainly no cheese, unless it happened to be government-issued. On better days, you might get a swipe of mustard or mayonnaise, applied thin with the back of a spoon. Most days, though, it was plain, chewy, dry, and strangely sour, with the faint smell of lunchboxes that had sat too long in the sun. Parents sometimes fried it to give it shape and sizzle, but cold or warm, it showed up again and again in brown paper sacks and on cafeteria tables from coast to coast. Bologna didn't care who you were or how many siblings you had. It showed up whether you wanted it or not, and you learned early on not to trade it, because chances were the kid next to you had the same thing. It wasn't gourmet, but it did the job. When money was tight, lunch didn't need flair. It only needed to be enough to carry you into the rest of the day. Jeans. If powdered milk reminded you of what you lacked at the breakfast table, then your jeans told the rest of the world before you said a word. Those tough skins from Sears weren't worn so much as endured. They were stitched from a blend of denim and polyester that felt more industrial than personal. Fabric meant to withstand years, not comfort days. You didn't wear them to make a statement. They made the statement for you. The knees were reinforced with patches thick enough to stop a fall or a small vehicle. They came in colors no one asked for: rust, mustard, mossy green. They creaked when you moved. They itched. And if you had siblings, you already knew your pair had been broken in by someone else, though broken in might be too generous a phrase. Still, they lasted. Through monkey bars, gravel driveways, and summer scrapes, they held strong. Parents prized their practicality. Children dreamed of freedom. But every time you tried to bend your knees or sit cross-legged in class, you remembered exactly who you were and where you stood. If they tore, out came the iron-on patches. If they didn't, you passed them down like heirlooms. Stiff, scratchy heirlooms with stories sewn into every unforgiving seam. Government cheese. When it came to dinner on a tight budget, nothing said resourcefulness quite like that unassuming slab of government cheese. It didn't come with a label or a logo. It came in a plain brown box, heavier than it looked and colder than you'd expect from something that refused to melt properly. It was cheese, or something close enough, and it never ran out when you needed it most. You didn't question it. You simply opened the box and got to work. Cutting it was a task in itself. It fought your butter knives and dulled your good ones, but once it surrendered, it became the backbone of casseroles and sandwiches, a key ingredient in 100 meals that somehow managed to stretch further than your grocery money ever did. Grilled cheese made with it was more glue than goo, and macaroni stuck together like it had secrets to keep. Still, it fed families. It brought comfort. And though no one called it gourmet, no one turned it away either. Mothers tucked it into lunch boxes. Neighbors shared extra blocks from their freezer. In towns large and small, that thick orange square became a quiet symbol of endurance. And in kitchens where little else was guaranteed, it offered consistency, warmth, and a full plate. Tang. Was it really orange juice? Of course not. But in the kitchens of the 1970s, Tang was close enough. Bright, bold, and waiting in that familiar tub with the cracked lid and the scooper forever buried at the bottom. You'd stir it into a pitcher of tap water with a long spoon, watch it fizz like something alive, and imagine yourself suiting up for a mission to the moon. No one mistook it for fresh squeezed citrus. It didn't taste like oranges. It didn't taste like anything nature had intended. And yet, it was sweet, cold, and brimming with possibility. A glass of Tang came with more than just vitamins. It came with dreams. NASA had said so. And for children whose only spaceship was a cardboard box in the backyard, that was more than enough. Mothers served it with breakfast, lunch, even dinner when real juice ran dry. It colored your lips, coated your teeth, and somehow made you feel modern, connected to a world far beyond your neighborhood. It showed up in thermoses and homemade popsicles, adding a little color to otherwise gray days. It didn't nourish like water or refresh like fruit, but it endured. And in a decade full of doing more with less, Tang earned its place at the table. Liver and onions. It wasn't supper. It was a signal. You could smell it long before your mother said a word, that unmistakable wave of something sharp and sorrowful drifting down the hallway. Liver and onions had a way of announcing itself, boldly, without apology, and not one child greeted it with joy. The liver, pan-fried until it turned the color of an old boot, rested beneath a blanket of onions that, despite their best efforts, couldn't soften the blow. You sat down because you had to, not because you wanted to. Your fork hesitated. You'd try to hide your grimace. You knew this was dinner, and there wasn't going to be a backup plan. No ketchup could disguise the taste. No slice of bread could ease the texture. You chewed slowly, willing it down, glancing toward the clock and hoping dessert hadn't been quietly canceled. Now and then, you slipped a piece under the table for the dog, who occasionally had the sense to decline. The rest went into next day sandwiches, stiffer and sadder. But you ate, because that's what families did. They stretched, they endured, and somehow you came away with a peculiar kind of gratitude, not for the liver itself, but for the resilience it taught you with every bitter, necessary bite. Ice cream truck. In those long golden summers of the 1970s, few things stirred more excitement than the distant jingle of the ice cream man's brass bells drifting along the block. Not digitized tunes, but real bells, rung by hand or swung from the side window. That chime always found its way to your ears, slipping through screen doors and catching kids mid-sentence. Games paused. Sandwiches lay forgotten. Bare feet hit the pavement as children scrambled for coins buried in junk drawers and couch cushions. The truck rolled by like a rolling dream, painted in cheerful colors, with a menu pasted to its side, offering frozen novelties that felt pulled from a comic strip. Rocket-shaped popsicles, sherbet spirals, and those wobbly character bars with mismatched candy eyes. But it wasn't only the treat. It was the wild dash, the thrill of catching it in time, the certainty that for just a few coins, you'd claimed something big. No one asked for proof of wealth. That clinking bell turned your street into a parade of laughter. And when it finally appeared, every kid was part of the show, with one hand waving and the other clutching hope on a stick. Plastic-covered couch. In a house where every dollar mattered, the living room couch wore armor. Clear, crinkly plastic stretched tight like a second skin. It wasn't there for comfort. It was meant to preserve. Sitting on it wasn't so much relaxing as enduring. As soon as you lowered yourself, it answered with a high-pitched squeak and the tug of your skin against heat-sealed vinyl. Summers made it unbearable. Bare legs clung to the surface as if fused, and every shift meant peeling yourself away from a sticky trap. In colder months, The couch turned slick and unwelcoming, icy through your clothing, and creaking loud enough to spook the dog. Yet nobody questioned its presence. That plastic cover was a contract. Keep the couch spotless, no matter the cost. Guests rarely settled into it unless specifically invited, and children were warned. Don't squirm, don't spill, don't lean too hard. The room looked polished, lace doilies, upright lamps, the air tinged with disinfectant, but it never truly belonged to anyone. It was both a display and a boundary. And when you stood up, your calves bore the gridwork left behind. It didn't improve the seating, but it did protect the furniture. And in that single mission, the plastic cover always succeeded. Rotary phone. Is any experience quite as deliberate as waiting for a rotary dial to click its way back to start, gear by gear, as you tried to reach someone down the line? In the 1970s, phones weren't light or effortless. They were heavy fixtures, often avocado green or beige, resting on a table cluttered with mail, paper clips, and yesterday's to-do list. The cord was an unruly spiral, stretched and tangled beyond repair. Once it frayed, a misstep could zap your ear or silence the whole call. Making contact took determination. You'd slide a finger into the numbered ring, twist it fully, let it grind back, and repeat. If you misdialed near the end, you started again from scratch. Occasionally, the receiver lost its grip on the line. You'd grip exposed wires between your fingers, trying to keep the signal alive long enough to shout whatever mattered most. We didn't grow up with shortcuts or luxury. What we had was tension, resistance, and a kind of dependability built from effort. Those calls weren't fast or private, but they connected people in a way screens never quite manage. Each ring, each crackle, each stubborn turn of the dial reminded you, this conversation mattered, because you earned every second of it. Hand-me-down clothes. Getting a sack of clothes from relatives you barely spoke to wasn't optional. It was tradition, bundled inside a black garbage bag and carrying the unmistakable scent of basements that hadn't seen daylight in years. You didn't choose them. You didn't ask for them. But every few months, your mother would arrive with what she called perfectly good clothes, destined for your closet, whether you agreed or not. Those hand-me-downs came with a past. The shirts had collars stretched in all directions. The jeans were stained in places no one wanted to talk about. The shoes didn't fit, but you were told, they'll break in. Your winter coat carried 3 lives on its seams and the wrong name in the collar. Complaining wasn't an option. You smiled on cue while your aunt beamed as if she'd just delivered gold. At school, kids noticed, so you became quick with a joke or learned to stay out of sight. What you really longed for was something new. Pants without patches, shirts without sag, and shoes that belonged to no one else. But what you got was a wardrobe stitched from hand-me-down survival. And somehow, that had to be enough. Family car. A hole in the floorboard didn't signal disaster. It simply meant the road came with a front row view. Beneath your sneakers, the pavement flashed by in a blur, and that rusted gap near the gas pedal did more than let in wind. It gave you updates on the weather. In winter, cold air clawed at your ankles. In spring, the puddles climbed higher than your socks. Summer tossed gravel against your shins in a gritty parade. And yet, nobody called it broken. Dad tossed down an old bath mat and declared it good as new. The vinyl seats clung in heat and turned stiff in cold. The windows weren't powered. They required determination. That dashboard could knock the wind out of you if the brakes caught you off guard. Toys that rolled beneath the seat sometimes vanished to the highway below. But the car still moved. It got you to school, to the store, to Sunday dinner. You didn't need plush interiors. You needed motion. And when the fumes crept in through the vents, you rolled the window down and carried on, because getting where you needed to go meant more than what carried you. Shoes. A hole in your shoe didn't mean replacement. It called for improvisation. You'd rip apart an old cereal box, trace the outline of your worn-down sole, and slide that cutout into your sneaker as makeshift support. Maybe it came from a box of Cheerios or Raisin Bran. For a brief stretch, it worked. It even stayed warm early on, but hit a puddle and the cardboard gave up fast. Your socks absorbed the result, wet, heavy, and glued to your skin. You didn't stop. You dried them by the radiator, swapped in a new insert, and kept moving forward. Shoes weren't replaced because they were worn. They were replaced because they were gone. Until then, you made do. Flapping soles, curled toes, frayed laces. It was all part of the routine, and somehow they still held together. Running was risky, jumping was rare, and gym class turned into cautious footwork. But nobody saw it as strange. That cereal box in your shoe stood for resourcefulness and quiet strength. You learned how to stretch time with scissors and tape, how to move carefully when the world beneath your feet wasn't forgiving. It wasn't stylish or smooth, but it got you where you needed to go, and that counted for a lot. Twin bed. How did sharing a twin bed become a childhood tradition rather than a hardship? In houses where money stayed tight and space even tighter, one mattress often pulled double duty. It sagged in the middle, pulled you both inward, and never once offered enough blanket for two. At bedtime, each kid claimed a side, but by dawn, it was an untamed pile of arms, knees, and tossed sheets. If you were the oldest, you earned the wall, less risk of falling. If you were smaller, you curled near the foot like a makeshift heater. The bed springs groaned with every shift. The pillow carried 100 heads worth of sleep, and the fabric bore more patches than cushion. But no one complained. You shared more than a bed. You shared stories whispered in the dark, silent battles for blanket territory, and the simple comfort of knowing someone was close. Bigger beds were luxuries seen on television. You had what you had, a noisy twin and a nightly truce. Privacy meant pretending to be asleep, and peace came not from space, but from togetherness. And as far as anyone was concerned, that was more than enough to sleep on. Did your family use any of these budget tricks to get through the 70s? Share one we might have missed. No dryer. Was skipping the dryer really a hardship, or just another ordinary Tuesday in the 1970s? Laundry back then was less about convenience and more about cooperation, ritual, and the stubborn usefulness of clothespins. Lines stretched from tree to pole like makeshift scaffolding, and the garments they held danced in the wind with a kind of defiance. One person hauled the basket, another did the pinning, knees brushing damp weeds or half-frozen earth. The breeze carried the scent of soap, grass, and the faint sting of rusted wire. In summertime, the sun worked overtime, baking the towels stiff and bleaching whites into brittle perfection. But when the cold settled in, shirts froze stiff before they ever dried, and jeans could stand upright on their own. Underwear threatened to migrate with the next gust. You learned to clip tight and hope the wind showed mercy. No one complained because the job got done. The sheets crackled against your skin, and the towels scratched you dry with honesty. Those weren't laundry days, they were teamwork written in cloth. And when it was over, the clothes didn't go into hampers. They went into old bread bags, folded and ready for another round. Canned dinners. Supper pulled from a can wasn't cooking, it was pure invention. The kitchen turned into a game of chance, where spinning the pantry shelf might land you on creamed corn, SpaghettiOs, or a dented tin of something labeled beef with gravy that looked more ambition than cow. You didn't protest. You pulled the manual can opener from the junk drawer, cranked it open with a sigh, and let the contents plop into a pot like secondhand stew. Vienna sausages became dinner theater, green beans cooked down to mush passed as greens, and fruit cocktail. That was your prize, a syrupy medley that always included exactly one cherry and too many pear cubes. If it came hot and didn't smell awful, it passed for supper. On tired nights, a spoonful of bargain brand ketchup made it bearable. On others, you ate in silence, grateful it didn't come with weevils. The food was salty, soft, and strange, but it filled plates and gave parents one less thing to worry about. And after the dishes were rinsed and the cans stacked for recycling or craft projects, you headed toward a bathroom where the soap never lathered right, but you used it anyway. Toilet paper. Toilet paper in those days wasn't soft or comforting. It was a lesson in endurance. It came thin, rough, and wrapped in plastic that made promises it couldn't keep. The roll looked friendly enough from a distance, but up close, it was as coarse as a barn floor. Each sheet was engineered for discomfort, and you learned to fold, not crumple, if you valued your skin. If it tore, you didn't panic. You adapted. Gray or off-white, occasionally laced with a splinter that proved paper once came from wood. The good stuff was for guests or people with carpeting in the bathroom. For the rest of us, the store brand roll was part of the deal. You used what you had. And then came the wrapping paper, not to be wasted, not to be torn. It came off gifts with surgical care, tape peeled, creases pressed, folds saved with all the attention of family recipes. Mothers oversaw the process, like museum curators. When holidays returned, so did the paper, stashed in drawers or boxes labeled by occasion. You thought everyone did that, until you saw a friend rip into a present without hesitation. But it did matter, because when resources were tight, everything had worth. Not paper, not pride, not the quiet lessons those years left behind. If this video successfully took you back to childhood, don't forget to hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe to the Who Remembers channel so you don't miss our next nostalgic journeys. Share this video with your friends from the same generation. Maybe they will also find their own beautiful memories. Thank you for spending your valuable time watching this video and reliving memories with me. See you in the next video.